The exterminator pulls up in his white truck. You can hear the crunch of the gravel in the driveway before you even see him through the window. He gets out, walks the perimeter of your home with a heavy plastic canister strapped to his back, and sprays a stream of clear chemicals along your foundation. He leaves a small, typed piece of paper tucked into your front door, gets back into his truck, and drives away. $800 a year, sometimes $1,000, sometimes $1,200. And it is not just for 1 year, it is every year, a perpetual bill for as long as you own that house. Why? Because the ants will be back next month. The cockroaches will return in the spring. The fleas will arrive with the dog when the weather warms. The spiders will find the dark corners of your basement, and the silverfish will slide across your bathroom floor. Round and round it goes, year after year, with that same white truck pulling up, that same canister hissing against your walls, and that same recurring invoice waiting in your mailbox. Now, I want you to sit with this for a moment. Stop and think about this cycle. Why have we accepted this constant, expensive routine as the only way to keep a home clean? How did our grandfathers and grandmothers keep their pantries and barns safe before these commercial service trucks existed? Understand this. There is a soft, plain white powder you can buy at almost any local garden store, a feed mill, or a small-town hardware store for about $4 a bag. Just $4. It kills the ants. It kills the roaches. It kills the fleas, the bedbugs, the silverfish, the earwigs, the slugs, and the beetles in your stored grain. It handles well over 100 different kinds of crawling pests, and it does it by using the exact same, simple, physical method on every single one of them. It is not a synthetic chemical poison. It is a natural mineral you dig straight out of the ground. It is so safe that the government allows it to be mixed directly into the large grain bins, holding the wheat and corn that eventually ends up on your dinner table. And once this powder is dusted into the right place and kept dry, it keeps working. Not for a week, not for a month, but for as long as it sits there, undisturbed. A single $4 bag standing against an $800 annual contract. My name is Elias Yoder. I am Amish, and I farm the soil here in Lancaster County, Pennsylvania. My grandfather first taught me about this white powder when I was just a young boy helping him out around the homestead. He kept a brown paper bag of it sitting in the corner of the granary to protect the harvested wheat, and another smaller sack out in the chicken coop to keep the mites off the setting hens. It has been sitting in our barns, our workshops, and our family pantries for my entire life. I have seen it work year after year, quietly, without any complicated equipment or expensive labels. Today, I am going to share this old knowledge with you. I want to tell you exactly what this mineral is, how it functions under the surface, the honest limits that determine whether it succeeds or fails, and why an entire multi-million-dollar industry built on the monthly service visit will never recommend it to you. Let us look first at what this powder actually is, because once you understand its physical nature, the rest of its application makes simple sense. Its formal name is diatomaceous earth. That is a long, heavy scientific name for something very basic. In plain language, it is a mineral dug from the earth, a soft, chalky, white deposit left behind by tiny ancient water creatures from long ago. When it is mined and ground down fine, it becomes a powder as soft as flour. It is light, dusty, and completely odorless. You can plunge your bare hand right into the bag without fear. There is no need for rubber gloves. There is no chemical burning. And there is no harsh chemical smell that forces you to clear out of the room. To your fingertips, it feels exactly like talc or baking flour. It looks like absolutely nothing out of the ordinary. But here is the marvel of it, the quiet secret that does the heavy lifting. If you were to take a tiny pinch of this flour-soft dust and place it under a powerful magnifying glass, you would see that these particles are not soft at all. They are tiny, incredibly hard, jagged, sharp-edged fragments. At the scale of a small crawling insect, these microscopic pieces of earth are as sharp as shattered window glass. soft as flour to a human hand, but a field of broken glass to a bug. This is the entire foundation of how it works. When an ant, a cockroach, or a flea walks across a thin, dusty layer of this powder, those microscopic sharp edges scratch right through the protective, waxy coating on the outside of the insect's shell. That thin, waxy layer is the only thing that holds the moisture inside the creature's body. Once that outer shield is scratched and breached, the moisture simply leaks out. The insect dries up from the inside out and dies. It is not poisoned. It is not made sick by toxins. The powder simply uses basic physics to dehydrate the pest. Think about what this means for a moment. This is the part that makes the large chemical companies uncomfortable. Insects are clever biological machines. Over many generations, they can build up a natural immunity to chemical sprays. The strongest bugs survive the poison, they breed, and after a few years, the expensive spray that worked a decade ago does not faze them anymore. But a living creature cannot build up a genetic resistance to a sharp edge. A bug cannot grow its skin thicker than a microscopic piece of glass. There is no evolutionary workaround for this powder. It works exactly the same on the modern, chemical-resistant bedbug as it did on the pests in my grandfather's time. The physics do not negotiate. But I must be completely honest with you about its limits. I am a practitioner, not a salesman, and I will not let you believe this powder is magic. It has firm boundaries. First, it requires patience. Because it relies on a physical process of drying the insect out, it does not work instantly. On soft-bodied or very small pests like ants and fleas, it might take a day or two. On a larger, tougher creature like a full-grown beetle or a heavy cockroach, it can take 3 days, a week, or sometimes slightly longer. They have more shell to grind through and more internal moisture to lose. If you sprinkle it down expecting the floor to be covered in dead pests by tomorrow morning, you will be disappointed. It is slow, but it is absolute. Second, it does not kill insect eggs. It only affects the living creatures that walk through the dust. If an insect has already laid eggs in your home, those eggs will eventually hatch. The new pests must then walk through the powder themselves to be stopped. This means you must leave the powder in place long enough to cover more than one hatching cycle. Patience, not panic. And then there is the most important limitation of all. The one thing that ruins most people's first attempt. Wet powder does absolutely nothing. If it encounters morning dew, heavy rain, a wet mop, or even the intense, trapped humidity of a small, closed bathroom, the water clumps the fine particles together. When the powder clumps, those microscopic sharp edges become dull and useless. Wet, the powder goes completely to sleep. Dry, it stays alive and active forever. It can sit in a drywall void for 20 years and still kill an ant today, exactly as it did 2 decades ago. Now that you understand the mineral and how it works, we must look at the practical side. Because if you walk into a store blindly, you are likely to buy the wrong bag. And getting this wrong can cause real trouble instead of solving it. There are 2 distinct types of this powder sold on the market, and they are completely different animals. One will protect your home safely, while the other belongs strictly outside in a commercial swimming pool filter. Furthermore, the way you spread this powder determines entirely whether the insects will walk through it or simply walk right around it. Let me show you the bags, and let me show you exactly how to apply it so it actually works. When you walk into the feed store, pass right by the bright plastic bottles of liquid poison. Look down near the floor where the heavy paper sacks sit. You want a bag that explicitly says food grade. When you open that sack at home, look closely at what is inside. The powder is an off-white color, very much like unbleached flour or wood ash from a cold stove. It has absolutely no smell. No chemical sting, no artificial perfume. If you pick up a pinch between your fingers, it feels entirely smooth, like talc. It pours like dry silt from a creek bed. To make this harmless dust do its work, you must prepare the right tool. The biggest mistake people make is trying to apply this powder directly out of the sack with a spoon or their bare hands. If you do that, you will end up with heavy piles, and heavy piles are useless. Instead, you need a simple tool called a powder duster. It is nothing more than a flexible plastic bulb attached to a long, thin tube. They cost a few dollars and last a lifetime. If you do not have one, an empty plastic ketchup squeeze bottle with a pointed tip, or an old spice shaker with small holes in the lid will do the same job. Let me show you how to load it, because there is a small trick to it. Open your bag carefully. Because it is so light, even a faint draft will cause the top layer to rise and dance like fine smoke. Take a small spoon and transfer the powder into the bulb. Stop and think about this. Do not fill the bulb to the top. If you pack it full, it will spit out a heavy clump of white paste. Fill the bulb only halfway, leaving the upper half completely empty. When you shake it gently, you should hear a faint, soft, muffled thud as the dry mineral slides against the walls. That empty space allows the air and the dust to mix together inside the chamber before it leaves the nozzle. Now, let us walk through the application itself, step by step, starting in the kitchen. Bend down and look at the baseboards where the wooden trim meets your floor. To an ant, the tiny gap beneath that trim is a wide highway. Take your loaded duster, hold it horizontally, and point the nozzle directly at that seam. Give the bulb a single, gentle, rhythmic squeeze. What leaves the tip should not be a solid white stream. It should be a fine, ghostly, barely visible fog. When that fog settles, it should look like nothing more than a very light frost on a winter window pane. If the wood looks bright white, you have used far too much. It must be so thin that if you were not looking for it, your eyes would pass right over it. Meave next to your heavy appliances. Slide the nozzle deep underneath the refrigerator, right toward the back where the compressor motor runs warm. Do the same beneath the stove and the dishwasher. These dark, warm spaces are where cockroaches congregate to breed. A couple of firm puffs into these hidden areas will create a permanent field of microscopic glass that will sit undisturbed for years. Now, let me show you an old contractor's trick for the walls themselves, because insects love to travel through the dead space behind your drywall. Go to an electrical outlet on an exterior wall. Before you touch it with a tool, understand this. Safety is a slow habit, not an afterthought. Turn off the power to that room at the breaker box, remove the plastic cover plate, and look for the small gap between the electrical box and the drywall. Insert the long tip of your powder duster directly into that dark gap and give the bulb one strong, deep squeeze. The air pressure will carry that fine white mist deep into the wall void, where it will coat the wooden studs. Because the interior of a wall remains bone dry forever, that single puff will continue to protect that section of your home for 30 years. If you are dealing with fleas in your carpets, the method changes slightly. Take your spice shaker, or a common kitchen sifter filled with the powder. Hold it at waist height and walk slowly across the room, shaking it gently so the dust falls like a very light flurry of snow across the fabric. Take a stiff broom and brush the powder deep into the fibers, pushing those microscopic particles down to the carpet's base where the flea larvae hide. Let it sit there for 4 or 5 days. Do not rush to vacuum it up. When you do finally vacuum, understand this. Clean your filters immediately afterward. This mineral is so fine and hard that it can clog a standard filter quickly and strain a small electric motor. Let us talk plainly about the most common mistake beginners make. I call it the snowdrift error. People think that if a little powder is good, a thick pile must be better. They dump out thick, solid lines of white dust across their doorways. If you do this, you will fail. An insect is small, but it is not entirely stupid. When an ant marches up to a mountain of white dust that is higher than its own head, it will stop, turn around, and find another path into your cupboard. You want an ambush, a layer so thin and transparent that the insect walks right through it without ever realizing its outer coat has been compromised until it is too late. You must also be vigilant about moisture. If you dust your porch foundation in the morning while the grass is still wet with dew, Or if you apply it to a damp basement floor, the powder will immediately absorb that water. It will lose its loose, dusty consistency and turn into something resembling wet gray clay. When that clay dries out, it forms a hard, crusty cake. The microscopic sharp edges are locked together, and they can no longer scratch the shell of a bug. If an area gets wet, you must wait for it to dry completely, scrape away the old crust, and apply a fresh, dry dust. Finally, take a moment for your own comfort before you begin. While this mineral is safe for your stomach, your lungs are built for pure air. When working in confined spaces like a sink cabinet, the floating dust will hang in the air. Breathing it in absorbs the moisture inside your throat, leaving you with a dry cough, much like working in a dusty hayloft during harvest. Spend 50 cents on a simple paper dust mask from the hardware store before you begin. Protect your breath, work with a slow hand, and let the physical laws of nature do the work. To truly understand the lasting power of this simple white earth, we must look backward, long before my grandfather ever filled his first sack in our granary, and even long before our people first cleared the fields here in Lancaster County. Stop and think about where this mineral actually comes from. Millions of years ago, vast inland lakes and ancient seas covered much of the dry land we walk upon today. In those waters lived billions of tiny, single-celled microscopic organisms called diatoms. These creatures were unique because they gathered silica directly from the water to build their own tiny, protective outer shells. When their life cycle ended, their microscopic remains drifted down to the dark bottoms of those ancient lakes, settling into thick, quiet layers over thousands of centuries. As the ages rolled on, the waters receded, the land dried, and those ancient lake beds became massive, dry ridges of white mineral deposits buried beneath the topsoil. It is a substance literally born of time and ancient life, a quiet gift left behind by the earth itself. Understand this. Our ancestors did not need modern laboratory microscopes to discover its usefulness. They simply watched the natural world with open, patient eyes. If you walk out into any dusty barnyard or watch the wild birds in the brush, you will see them perform a strange, regular ritual. A chicken or a wild turkey will find a dry, dusty patch of loose earth, drop its breast into the dirt, and vigorously flap its wings until it is completely shrouded in a thick cloud of dust. They are taking a dust bath. To an outsider, it looks like they are simply getting dirty. But the old farmers knew exactly what the birds were doing. They were using the dry, fine particles of the earth to rid their feathers of mites, lice, and biting fleas. The ancient peoples took note of this natural defense. In ancient China and Egypt, historical records show that keepers of grain would mix dry, crushed mountain dust and chalky clay directly into their stone granaries to keep the weevils from spoiling the harvest. They discovered by pure necessity that dry earth was the natural enemy of the crawling insect. As the decades advanced into the modern era, science began to look closely at these old traditions to see if they held real weight, or if they were merely old superstitions. What they found surprised them. In the mid-20th century, agricultural researchers began conducting formal, rigorous testing on this white mineral. In 1960, the United States government formally recognized this ancient knowledge by officially registering diatomaceous earth as a safe and effective material for controlling pests in commercial grain storage. If you were to dig through the older archives of university, agricultural extension offices, including the historical research bulletins published right here by Penn State University, you would find extensive documentation detailing the precise mechanics of this powder. The technical papers describe how the sharp silica structures absorb the waxy lipid layer from the insect's epicuticle. Now, that is a long, heavy string of scientific words, but understand what it means in plain terms. Modern science proved that the powder scratches away the microscopic layer of grease that keeps the insect's moisture inside its body. The bulletins confirmed that this simple, Natural dust performed just as well as the newly invented chemical sprays of the era, but with one massive advantage: it never lost its physical strength, and it never left a single trace of chemical toxin in the food. Look at how we live today. We have been taught to trust only what is loud, expensive, and delivered by a professional in a uniform. We have come to believe that if a problem is persistent, the solution must involve a complicated chemical formula created in a laboratory. But the old knowledge reminds us that the most enduring solutions are often the quietest ones, found directly in the soil beneath our boots. The $4 bag of food-grade diatomaceous earth has been sitting on the bottom shelf of the local feed mill for over a century, unchanged and unadvertised, while the chemical companies cycle through hundreds of different formulas, always searching for the next spray after the insects become immune to the last one. So, I want to leave you with a direct invitation today. The next time you see that white truck pulling up into a neighbor's driveway, or the next time you find a trail of small black ants marching across the clean wood of your kitchen counter, do not fall back into the routine of panic and expensive dependency. Break the cycle. Take a slow, quiet drive down to your local feed store, your garden center, or a traditional hardware store. Look past the bright plastic jugs of poison and ask the clerk for a plain bag of food-grade diatomaceous earth. Bring it home, treat it with the small respects we spoke of, and lay down that thin, ghostly line of white dust along your baseboards, under your sink, and around your foundation. Step away from the monthly subscription and put your trust back into a remedy tested by generations of farmers who could not afford to be wrong. Let the ancient earth do the quiet work that the expensive chemicals never could. And when you see it work with your own eyes, pass that knowledge down to someone else who is still waiting for the white truck to arrive.